What is the appropriate treat size for your dog? Whenever you're doing training, what is the appropriate size that your treats should actually be when you're delivering food to them? How many treats should they get during a training session? How long that training session should be? There's so many questions that really can surround this, but in this video, we're really going to talk about how to identify what size of treat is going to be appropriate for your training session. In really broad, simple terms, the answer is it really should be as small as you can get away with. Really what we're looking for from a training session with our dogs actually eating the treats that we're giving them is we're not really looking for them to chew the food. We're looking for them to just take the treat in their mouth, maybe chew it once, but then basically swallow it and be ready to go for the next repetition. That really, in essence, is what we want in training. We want fast repetitions with our dogs. We want to get multiple repetitions in. We really don't want to get to the end of 5 or 10 repetitions unless you have a small dog. But we don't want to get to the end of those repetitions and you've only done 5 or 10 and your dog is full. That's not productive for training. That's not what we want out of most training situations. I say most because there's always exceptions to everything. But in general, we really want our dogs to be able to have a treat that is small enough to just swallow and they're ready for the next repetition. One of those big exceptions is training for reactivity or any sort of big behavior change in a challenging environment. I'm just thinking about this because I was just doing this on a walk with Wrigley not too long ago when we had 2 dogs on either side of us and we had to walk straight down the middle. I really, in that moment, needed larger treat sizes than I actually had. I had the treat size I'm talking about in this video, that like eraser size treat. But what was happening is Wrigley was stressed, so she was taking the food really hard, which was causing her to be sloppy about it going into her mouth. And my treat delivery was also sloppy because she was hurting my hand when she was trying to bite it really hard to get at the food. She also was really slobbery that day just because it was warm out. So because the treats were so small and she was taking them so hard, I was constantly dropping food, which is not ideal. And if you know, you know, but it's not ideal in a situation where you have a dog that has large emotions towards other dogs and you're trying to just get them through it. Wrigley has a lot of practice with this, but it was a really sloppy session. I'm putting a little video here as you guys can kind of see it. So we practiced this after the fact, but what I really needed and what would have been really helpful in this situation is to actually have had larger treat chunks that I could have very easily delivered, much more easily than trying to finagle with the really small treats in a challenging situation. I also could have guided her through the harder moments when I didn't need or have time to be dropping treats. I could just treat magnet as an option instead. So that is a really good example of a situation where larger treat sizes is going to be super ideal. This could also be in like if you're working in Lowe's or Home Depot or just downtown in like a crowded type of environment. Sometimes having access to those larger treat sizes can be really helpful for guiding your dog through and managing in situations where you need to manage. I'm also going to talk about the vet because we are going to the vet here later and what I do to prepare for that as well, because how I prepare treats for the vet is different in how I prepare them for a standard training session. A good general rule of thumb when you're looking for treats or you are cutting up your own treats is you want to aim to have most of your treats about the size of the end of an eraser or a fingernail or a small pea. That's really kind of the size and the ideal size that we are going for when it comes to a training treat. Now, when you're searching for treats and when you're cutting up your own treats, I cut up these treats and look at how different those two are. I was not very careful with my cuts, but for the most part, I'll show you guys an up close of these cut up treats here. For the most part, most of my treats are, I would say, about this size. This size, I have a 35-pound dog and I have a 55-pound dog. And for both of them, it allows them to, again, take that treat into their mouth, maybe chew it once, but basically swallow it and be ready for the next repetition. I really like to put all of my treats into a little container like this and portion them out as we go. We'll talk about portioning here in a moment. But in general terms, that's really what you're looking for with a treat size. You want to get many repetitions in most training sessions. When you sit down to do training, you don't have all the time in the world. We want to get the most out of that session. So actually how you prepare your treats can really make a huge difference when it comes to the efficiency of the training session, as well as how long your training session can last for. Now, this is not to say that you should have your training sessions be an extended long production. That is really not going to be beneficial for most training sessions. The shorter, actually, the better in terms of your dog actually retaining the information that you're trying to teach them. That being said, if we can take a short training session and actually be able to get more repetitions in within 5 minutes, within 10 minutes, than you would if you had treats that were way too large for what you're actually working on, that's also going to benefit you in the end. So I wanted to put this in here because I'm cutting up treats right now for Wrigley. We are going to the vet this evening, and I definitely have different opinions on the ideal treat size whenever I'm taking her to the vet, or even when I'm doing things like reactivity training when we're in close proximity to other dogs. The treat size in that case, I definitely don't tend to prefer a small treat size all by itself. So what I mean by that is I have a little bowl right here, and all of these treat sizes are of varying sizes. So I'm cutting up these liver treats that are clearly like a thicker chunk, and I'm intentionally leaving it like this so that when the vet actually has hands on her, I can wedge this in between my fingers like this, and she can actually nibble on it in between my thumb and my index finger, rather than a small training treat size. I can't really do that with. She's gonna gnaw my finger off if I do that. So I've got like a larger hunk of steak right here. So I have varying sizes of treats for challenging situations. And I think that's something important to think about. I'm gonna do the exact same thing with a thicker cheese chunk that I'll have here in a minute. But thinking about if your dog is going into a challenging situation, larger treat chunks can actually be a little bit more helpful in those specific cases, again, depending on the dog, to make it a little bit more interesting. But then I also have smaller treat sizes in here so that she's not getting, I don't want to make them all large, so she's getting a huge amount of food, but just some of them are larger than others, so I can really take a handful and have her nibble. When she finishes this one, I already have the next one ready to go. She can nibble it, and then maybe there's a small one behind that. She can just get that. So I think it kind of helps to vary and help you out in the moment with making that challenging experience a little bit easier, especially if your dog is challenged. I'm talking about Fenway in my case with taking food. I find that varying the treat size to a larger size in an environment that is challenging for your dog, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever it may be, larger treat chunks can be easier to start with and utilize in that environment in combination with the smaller ones. So just so you can kind of get a better visual if my explanation didn't make any sense. So I have varying treat sizes here. More of them are on the larger side, like these cheese cubes. I'm just leaving some of them as cubes and then crushing up some of the other ones so they become smaller pieces. And then same thing, like these liver treats are a larger size. I like this one for like nibble purposes because it's a more hearty treat, rather than if I squeeze the cheese between my fingers, it's gonna crumble like that, which is fine. But this is gonna be more like, here, just eat this cube of cheese if we're uncomfortable about what the vet is doing in the moment. Same with the little bits of steak. But the liver treats are like strategically for like nibble on between my fingers. But varying treat sizes, larger treat sizes are always going to work better for us at the vet. And I'm kind of throwing everything into a bowl right here. So just a little observation of that. So what treats are really best for getting this really nice pea-sized, customized small treat? Because not a lot of treats, if you've noticed, that are on the market just nicely come pre-packaged this way. This is very true. You really have to hunt for the good ones. So my personal favorites are any treat that I can break up within my hand into a smaller size. That mainly includes all air-dried foods. So a lot of air-dried treats come in this kind of square shape like this, but but it makes it very easy to take one treat and turn it into two. That's usually what I do when I pick up an air-dried treat, and I'm working 2 dogs most of the time anyways. Even if I was just working 1 dog, this air-dried square is a little bit too large. That's too large for what I would prefer to use actually as a training treat. And a lot of times I'm actually breaking this into quarters as well. A lot of these air-dried treats, they crumble a teeny tiny bit, but they still very much hold their shape. So I really like air-dried treats for that purpose. There's a brand of air-dried treats that you can buy. The company is Rawternative. I'll put a link down in the description below. That you can get a really large bag of it. It is pricey. Any air-dried food that you purchase, I will tell you, is pretty pricey, but it's also really good for your dog. There's a lot of good nutrients in here. It is really nutrient dense, so I would keep that in mind if you go to try out this treat for the first time. If you're giving a lot of it, that again is another reason for breaking your treats into really small pieces versus feeding this big thing. It's very nutrient dense. So if your dog is getting it for the first time, it may irritate their stomach just because of how nutrient dense it actually is. So even more reason to break those treats up into small bite-sized pieces. But that is one brand of air-dried dog food that I find myself purchasing over and over again. There also is another brand called Real Meat that is basically the same product. It just is packaged a little bit differently. My goodness, I'm throwing treats. Just packaged a little bit differently, but those two I find at most local pet shops around me. The other brand that I really like is Open Farm. Came out with a new air-dried food. I really like that as well. That one is more similar if your dog has ever had Ziwi Peak. It's about this size. It's a little bit smaller than the treat size that I just showed you. Still a square, but it's a little bit smaller and it's a little bit less crumbly whenever you go to break it apart. So Open Farm's air-dried food I really, really like because of that. Same with Ziwi Peak. That is a little bit smaller in general. That comes at a hefty price tag, I will tell you that. And that one I do find to upset my dog's stomachs if they haven't had it in a while. I have to feed really small amounts of it at first. But I still really like it. Basically, any air-dried food I'm using as treats maybe 90% of the time. Now the treat that is in this jar, and you saw me showing in the beginning, these little squares, I cut these up myself. I really prefer that when it comes to training treats. I really like Happy Howie's rolls for that. I like these because you can purchase these logs and really cut down the treat size to your ideal size treat. I will say a lot of the treat rolls that exist out there are very crumbly and don't keep their shape. Lucy Pet is also another decent one, but I just really prefer Happy Howie's, and my dog Fenway, who's very picky, also prefers Happy Howie's. He gets very excited and these treats are seen as higher value to him, but I like these because I can customize the treat size. The rolls of treats, because I can customize the size in that I cut them up to, actually end up being less expensive in the long run because I get a lot more out of them in that way. Even though I can break up these larger air-dried treats, I just find that the Happy Howie's rolls last me longer because I can really make that determination ahead of time. I can't feed this as a training treat all in one. I have to go in ahead of time and do some prep work. And I find that when I do that, I'm a little bit more meticulous and I can really decide in that moment as I'm cutting the treats what I want the treat size to be. Where honestly, I could do that. I could dump out a little bag of the air-dried treats and prep them ahead of time by breaking them up into smaller pieces, but I'll tell you what, I do not do that. I break them up as they are in my treat bag and I'm ready to deliver treats, and sometimes the need to deliver a treat fast overrides the need for me to break it up smaller. So take with that what you will, but I definitely think that both are very good options. The third option that I prefer and I use frequently for training treats is freeze-dried raw. I really like Open Farms freeze-dried raw specifically because it doesn't crumble super easily. It does crumble. Any freeze-dried raw treat is going to crumble a little bit, but it does hold its shape to a helpful degree in that I can sit there and break it up similar to these air-dried treats. I can break it up and deliver treats and it still holds its shape. Freeze-dried raw treats are definitely seen as a higher value reinforcer for my dogs, so I use that quite frequently in training as well. It also is one of those nutrient-dense treats, so if you're going to introduce it very slowly at first in little bits. So I've never sat there and counted exactly how many treats my dogs are getting during training, but a little tip is taking a little container like this and portioning out exactly how many treats you want to give out during a training session. I don't know about all of you, but for me, it's very easy to see my dogs succeed, and I'm just handing out more and more and more treats, and pretty soon I'm going through this entire thing. I actually went through this last night. This was full last night, and I did a bad job. I took this whole thing in for training and I used most of it. I used about 3/4 of it. So if you want to be very conscious about the extra calories that you are putting into your dog, make sure that you are portioning out your treats. One of the main questions that I get is, how do I maintain my dog's weight when I'm just handing them treats and treats and treats? You see me treating them very heavily in videos, but that is not their everyday life. Wrigley's over here right now not getting food from me, but I make sure that I maintain a really solid exercise routine for my dogs. I portion out the amount of treats that I want to give them. I don't count the individual treats, but I have an idea. You can look at the nutrition facts on the individual treats that you purchase for your dogs. You keep your treat sizes really small and you don't do super long training sessions. That's it. It's really simple to keep your dog's weight and have a very, very healthy dog while also having a really high rate of reinforcement, giving your dog treats over and over and over again when they're learning something new. A lot of that becomes really easy and not something you have to think about. I hope this was helpful. There are so many other treats on the market that I may not have mentioned in this video that might work really, really well for your dog. I just wanted to provide some different examples of treats that I use that I find very, very easy to cut down to the exact size that I want to deliver during training. So hopefully that was helpful. Keep your treat sizes very small and best of luck in training. I'll see you in another video.